Dust up your DIY for a whole afternoon of solutions to household problems. Join Duncan Stewart for expert advice on renovations and conversions as DIY foundations are laid in our house. As a guide to restoration, this old house takes the lid off the art of painting and decoration, from marble paint effects to reviving an old floor. And Running Repairs gives practical advice as Barty Phillips turns her hand to maintaining a home, from waterproofing a fence to tips on how to wipe out stains. Inspiration all afternoon for the creative DIY enthusiast. DIY Day, next Saturday afternoon from 1 on TLC.
Feeling run down? Then get this week's Ultimate Health Guide. Only in You magazine. Free with the mail on Sunday.
This is pure new wool. It's beautiful.
The new Spring and Summer Grattan catalogue is packed with brilliant clothes. For your free copy, call 0800 771 772. You'll find clothes for every occasion. With Grattan, you can use our next day delivery service. And you can have 20% off your first order. For your free copy of the Grattan Spring and Summer catalogue, call now free of charge on 0800 771 772.
Introducing the remarkable Craftmatic 2 electrically adjustable bed. Not only does it cost no more than many quality flatbeds, but when you trade up to the Craftmatic Model 2 with heat and built-in massage, you'll get a bonus, a beautiful colour TV completely free. So call free on 0800 33 77 22. You'll be able to stop using all those pillows to prop yourself up. In a Craftmatic adjustable bed, you assume the position you find most comfortable at the touch of a button. Watching TV, relaxing, getting a good night's sleep. Take the pressure off your back automatically. Raise and support your head, neck and shoulders automatically. And elevate your legs and feet automatically. Plus, there's optional heat and massage to help soothe you. Call now for a free information pack, and we'll also send you a voucher to claim your free colour TV. Call 0800 33 77 22 right now. That's 0800 33 77 22. There's no cost and no obligation.
Twin Peaks has many dark secrets.
You ever heard of One-Eyed Jacks?
My log has something to tell you.
The owls are not what they seem.
This must be where pies go when they die.
It is happening again.
Twin Peaks' darkest secret is about to be revealed. Thursdays at 9 on Bravo.
Boys' Toys, 2 hours of high-speed, high-tech television. At 9, 60 action-packed minutes in the air, on land and at sea. Then at 10, slip into top gear with an hour of classic wheels. Boys' Toys, 2 hours at full throttle, starting every weekday at 9 on Discovery.
Turn your house into a dream home with TLC's very own Homefront. Starting every weekday morning at 10:30 with Our House. Award-winning architect Duncan Stewart shares his secrets on how to convert and transform houses. Then at 11 in Painted House, Debbie Travis shows how using the simplest techniques you can breathe new life into old rooms. And in Running Repairs at 11:30, Barty Phillips shows you how you can keep your home in tip-top condition with a practical guide to home maintenance. So, for the A to Z of DIY, there's no place like the Homefront. Every weekday morning from 10:30, only on TLC.
Bon appetit. But the food is incredible. So slow down and enjoy it. Welcome to my old-fashioned chicken dinner.
Take Julia Child, America's answer to Delia Smith.
Trouble trying to show everything. There's never quite enough time.
Let me give you a dish that you'll, I know no one else would give you this sort of thing, but I want you to try it.
Then add a taste of Jeff Smith.
Enjoy yourself. The world is here for our taking.
Then round off with Martin Yan, the man who can.
The curtain's going up. Bring on the showstoppers.
All these add up to a tasty dish of home cooking from over there. Grab a slice of American pie, weekdays from midday, only on TLC. Everyone's favorite ingredient.
Tim Grundy starts in Land's End in half an hour and works his way eastwards. Cornish history explored by one man and his mate. Before that, on TLC, more Local Heroes, presented by Adam Hart-Davies.
Welcome to Local Heroes. This is the programme that seeks out the people who first had those brilliant ideas that now we all take for granted. This week's clutch includes the world's first conservationist and alligator jockey, and a rector who found something in a ditch in Wigan that lit up the country for 100 years. To all to whom these presents shall come, I, Joseph Aspdin, of Leeds in the county of York, bricklayer, send greeting. Whereas His present most excellent Majesty King George IV grant to me, Joseph Aspdin, his special licence, that I should and lawfully might make, use, exercise and vend within England, Wales and the town of Berwick upon Tweed, my invention of an improvement in the modes of producing an artificial stone. And this is it. In fact, the whole of this building is faced with it. This is the last building anywhere made with the original artificial stone, patented by Joseph Aspdin in 1824. But although most of the original material has disappeared, his idea lives on in almost every building in the world because his other name for the stuff was Portland cement. The great thing about cement is it's wonderfully simple. It uses only 2 ingredients. In this place, both of them come from the same quarry. It's about 3/4 of a mile over that way, and they come up on 2 conveyor belts, crashing into the top of this building. One huge pile there, one huge pile here. The 2 ingredients are chalk and clay. Now, this is a particular sort of clay called Kimmeridge clay. It's very dark, and the white bits are old dead animals, fossils. If you feel it, it's quite hard. It's difficult even to break little bits off, but it feels sort of greasy. For thousands of years, people have been making cements using these 2 things, chalk and clay, but Joseph Aspdin's brilliant contribution was to work out how to cook them together. Some of my heroes have little ideas, and some have big ones. I reckon if he'd had any notion as to where his idea was going to lead, Joe Aspdin, the brickie from Hunslet, would have been absolutely gobsmacked. So they grind up 4 parts of chalk and 1 part of clay and mix them together. It looks like cement, it feels like cement, but it isn't. To be capable of setting hard, the chalk and the clay have to be reacted together, and for that you need an oven. Joe Aspdin discovered that you need to get the mixture really hot, 1400 Celsius. He used an old glass furnace, but the principle here is just the same, except that these kilns at Rugby Cement are the size of space rockets. Is the hot end of the kiln. It's 1400 degrees Celsius in there, and it's the final stage of the reaction between the chalk and the clay. They turn into clinker and it drops out of the bottom. Then all it needs to be is to ground up to make cement. The whole kiln is 100 yards long, and as you can see, the whole thing's turning slowly round and round like that. It's also tilted down from the far end, just about 4 degrees, so that all those little nodules come rolling down from the cold end, 100 degrees, down to the hot end, 1400 degrees here. This is extremely hot. I'm sweating even through the mask. There's coal dust and air belting through here, and there's an enormous flame. It's about, I don't know, 15 feet long, 1800 degrees down the middle. Absolutely sweltering hot. And then, if I look a bit to the right, on the wall, as the thing goes round, the clinker, white hot clinker, is pouring off about 1400, the last stage of the process. Now, if Joe Aspdin hadn't had his brilliant idea, they would have stopped this kiln 20 yards down. And then it would never have got this hot, and they would never have made Portland cement. Thanks very much. Great. My next hero is Joseph Hobson Jagger, who became rich and famous in a casino, and I've come here to do the same thing. Joe Jagger was a spindle engineer in Shelf near Bradford, and his job was to go into the mill every morning and make sure that the spindles ran as smoothly as oiled silk. On the 7th of July, 1875, Joe went on his holidays to the south of France. And while he was there, he wandered into the casino. Now, I might be interested in the bright lights or the beautiful ladies, but not Joe. Joe was interested only in the spindles. In fact, they made him feel at home. And of course, there are spindles in roulette wheels. And he noticed, because he had an ear for rotating machinery, that the spindles there didn't run as smoothly as oil silk. In fact, they ran like rusty old bicycles. One wheel in particular was extremely rough. He wondered, will some numbers come up more often than others? For several nights, he watched and made notes of the numbers that did come up, and he found that indeed there was a pattern. In particular, the numbers 7, 8, 9, 17, 18, 19, 22, 28, 29, thank you, love, came up considerably more often than they should have done by chance. On the last 3 nights of his holiday, he bet a lot of money on those numbers, and he won 2 million francs. That's more than £10 million in today's money, and to this day he's remembered all over the world, both by casino managers who level the wheels with spirit levels every day to make sure that they don't run rough, and also by punters, because Joseph Hobson Jagger, spindle engineer from Shelf, was the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo.
Hear them die and wish that I would see them wink the other eye at the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo. As I walk along the white below with an independent air, and hear the bells declare, he must be a millionaire. And hear them die and wish that I would see them wink the other eye at the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo.
My next hero, John Clayton, made one of the major discoveries that fueled the Industrial Revolution. He discovered coal gas, and I've come to Crofton, near Wakefield, to repeat his experiment in the authentic location.
Which has got not John Clayton's name on, but the church wardens who did the repairs. Gosh, it's okay.
The current rector is Bruce McClellan, and John Clayton was his predecessor over 300 years ago. We're on the church roof in search of Clayton's spoor.
Here. Yes? William Poppleton and Daniel Marshall, church wardens, when this, meaning this piece of lead,
right,
and the steeple was repaired Ed. 1689.
1689, and he came here in 1687, right?
Yes.
July 1687, so he'd been here 18 months.
Yes.
And did the roof. But before he did the roof, he did something else, which was actually, I think, much more interesting. We know exactly where John Clayton got his brilliant idea because he wrote a wonderful letter about it. It was in a ditch in Wigan. Within 2 miles of the centre of Wigan, a ditch where the water seemed to burn like brandy, he said, and the flame was so fierce that several strangers boiled eggs over it. Now, that was, you know, most of us would just have said, gosh, or written to the Wigan Chronicle or whatever. But he was determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. So what he did was to drain the ditch and dig down, and he found some coal down there. Yeah. And he thought, well, maybe this coal makes the air catch fire. It was a wonderful description. So what he did was to shove a candle down the hole, and he said, yes, the air catched fire and continued burning. So he took some of this coal home with him, and he wondered what would happen if he heated it up. And I happen to have my portable distillation apparatus with me up here. And I thought, this is what we ought to do, is repeat John Clayton's great experiment. We're following in the footsteps of the maestro. I brought some good Yorkshire coal here, and I didn't actually go all the way to Wigan for this, but I expect it'll work just as well. Okay, do you want to light?
Ready?
Yeah. Okay. Right, that's quite promising. Right, so what I'm going to do is just hold this here until it gets very hot. Please don't catch fire on my behalf.
I haven't warned the insurance company. So.
Ah, do you think we ought to be covered for burning anything on the church roof, oughtn't we?
I hope so, yes.
He wrote a rather nice, clear description of his experiment, and he said he got, at first, just phlegm, and I guess that's what... Oh, there, we've got good phlegm now.
Phlegm coming up,
Yes, and with luck, that ought to come over into the second tube, and you can see the phlegm coming over now quite well. So he said the second thing he got was black oil, and he didn't know it, but he was actually...
it's bubbling up through him.
That's right. It's good. He was actually inventing the chemical industry, because this, of course, is coal tar.
Yes.
If I had a cold, it would do wonders for it, just sniffing in. It does actually smell a bit like soap, doesn't it?
Yes.
Oh, now,
yes, really.
Now, the question is, can we light the end of it? Do you have a spare hand to try the matches again? I don't think there's much chance of it burning for long, but still.
Yes.
Flame. Well, I think he was a very, very bright chap. He did, after all, go on to become a bishop.
Yes.
He probably had more sense than to do it on the church roof.
Yes. They've got it. Oh.
Now that
Yes.
pathetic little flame may look feeble, but in fact, that was the beginning of an entire industry. That was what lit up the whole nation for 100 years. This is exactly what John Clayton did, probably in 1688. It was probably the year after he came here, and indeed the year before he repaired the roof. This was, even to him, this was more important than repairing the church roof. There was a tiny little puff. Yes. Now, you may not believe that could light up the industrial area, but I promise you it did. And on a bigger scale, this would, the whole of Barnsley and Manchester. My next door neighbour suggests I should go into competition with British Gas. Maybe I should have 4 of these tubes. But anyway, this is what did it. The whole Industrial Revolution lit up, indeed the whole country, lit up by coal gas, invented by John Clayton here in this church 302 years ago to this very day. Well, nearly. These deadly darts come from South America, and they're tipped with the lethal woorali poison. Now, I'm told that if I just touched that, well, I'd only do it once. And the way you used them was this. You kept them in this quiver here in a bundle, and when you wanted to use one, you took one out and you put a little wad of this cotton wool-like stuff behind it, and you put it in your blowpipe and you went, right, curtains for whatever you're shooting at. Well, probably not with me, but with somebody who's a good shot. They were collected in 1812 because this woorali stuff is what we'd now call curare. And they were collected by a man who was interested in its medical properties. He was not only an eccentric traveller, but also the world's first conservationist. His name was Charles Waterton. Now, Waterton wasn't just interested in conservation, he was also interested in preservation. And wherever he went, he collected specimens. And these are all his specimens, all the way around here, hundreds of them, animals and birds from all over the world. And here, for example, we've got a Roman lobster. It's still got his own handwriting. These are the cases he built. It says Roman lobster, 1841. Unfortunately, someone here in the museum misread that, and it's been called Norman ever since. Still, a jolly good name for a lobster. He actually developed his own method of preserving things. He talked about the problem with Sir Joseph Banks in 1819, shortly before Banks died. And he worked out the details when he was lying awake in South America one night. And what he did was this. This is an English polecat, Walton Hall, 1836. And if you look, it's completely hollow. He never stuffed anything. What he did was to take the skin and treat it with mercuric chloride. Nasty, poisonous stuff. That's why Mad Hatters went mad. And he had to do that every day for about 5 days, and gradually the skin got stiffer and stiffer, and he was able to mould it back to the original shape. Now, the great thing was he was an ardent naturalist. He really knew what these things did and how they looked in their habitats. So he was able to make them look not only the right shape, but also put them in natural poses and so on, because he really loved watching them in the wild. His method of preservation clearly worked too, because these animals look absolutely wonderful. In fact, they probably look as good now as they did 170 years ago. And this is where he lived, at Walton Hall, a great house on an island, just a few miles from Wakefield. The whole place was rebuilt by his dad, and when the old man died in 1805, Charles Waterton became the 27th Squire of Walton Hall. In the summer of 1818, he decided to turn the entire estate into a nature reserve. And probably what prompted this was that during his lifetime, the population of Leeds grew from 20,000 to 200,000. Factories sprang up all over the place, polluting the atmosphere. The last buzzard was seen here in 1813, and the last raven in Yorkshire was shot in 1820. So what he wanted was a sanctuary, a refuge for all wild creatures. This magnificent caiman from South America lurks in Wakefield Museum with the rest of his specimens. And like the rest, it's completely hollow. Its spectacular capture was recorded in this painting. Insisting that the hide must not be damaged, Waterton persuaded the locals to hook it like a fish, while he vaulted onto its back and rode it to the shore. He spent 3 months in South America in a ruin of a house, which he shared with a whole lot of toads and vampire bats. In fact, he was very fond of the vampire bats, and as he wrote, "Many a night have I spent with my toe hanging out of the hammock, hoping for a visit from the winged surgeon. But it was all in vain. He never did get bitten." Now, recently, a Japanese friend of mine gave me this natty little device. And if I press the right buttons, it tells me that it's 5:35 here in England, and in New York, it's about 11:35, and in San Francisco, it's about 8:36. Oh, and we've just gone over the minute. And so on, all the way around the world. It's a really good device for the international jet setter, which is what I'd like to be and trying to pretend I am. Now, Charles Waterton was a great globetrotter, so he could really have used this. But fortunately, he had this thing, which does exactly the same job. It was built in 1813 by George Boulby, who was the stonemason in the next village. And he fortunately read Plato in his spare time, and so he built this Platonic solid with all these triangular faces, 20 of them. It's an icosahedron. And on each face, there's a gnomon of a sundial. And if you look, there's the shadow of the sun, which tells me that it's about 4:30 in Cartagena, because on every face, there are engraved the names of different places. Here we've got, it's about, 4:45 apparently in Boston. Well, it's very faded, that one, and that's Savannah and Demerara, and well, we're into shadow around here, but it's always shining on 10 of these faces, so we should be able to come back here to Mexicala, Madrid. In fact, it's a really wonderful device, but I reckon he would have had some difficulty fitting this into his filofax. Now, the reason I've come here to this rather desolate site is because this is mining country near Wakefield. There's Altofts over there, and this is where there was Pope and Pearson's pit 100 years ago, going full steam. And indeed, this was where this lump of concrete was where they capped it off 30 years ago when they finally closed it down. And the particular reason that interests me is that in 1886, on the 2nd of October, there was an explosion underground, a coal dust explosion, because at noon, 400 men came out of the pit, and 28 men and boys went down to clear the coal dust off the ground. 3 hours later, terrible explosion, 21 of them died. The coroner recorded a verdict of death by explosion of coal dust. Not coal gas, not fire damp, but coal dust. And most people didn't believe this was possible. In fact, for 20 years, they went on arguing whether or not it was possible for coal dust to explode. So the manager of the mine here, a man called William Garforth, set out to find out if it could possibly happen. The thing is that coal doesn't seem a very likely thing to cause explosions, because if you have a look at this, here's a lump of coal. If you really heat it a lot, you can get little sparks at the edge, but it's hard to believe that that's ever going to explode. So what Garforth wondered was how much difference it made if it was ground up into dust. So what he did was to get some coal dust, and I've got some here which I got by grinding in my coffee grinder, so it's very nice and fine. And just have a look and see what happens when I puff this into the flame so it's well mixed with air. Well, it's still nothing like an explosion, but it certainly burns if you mix it up thoroughly. So what Garforth then thought was he ought to try and generate a real explosion. So he took some of this coal dust and he put it into a tube, like a miniature coal mine. We'll just remove that, and then he fired a small explosive charge and this is what happened. You don't mind if I go back a bit, do you? Well, it's not an explosion to terrify and kill people, but you can see that the coal dust is beginning to burn. And the great thing that Garforth realized was he'd have to do it on a big scale. Wow, that's a bit better. It feels like a real coal mine. When William Garforth started his explosive work in 1908, he was trying to answer a controversy. Was it possible for coal dust to explode? Here is the Health and Safety Executive at Buxton, and they're carrying on his work. In fact, they're carrying on in his footsteps. You can see them down there in the tunnel. That tunnel is exactly like a mine shaft. It's 7 foot 6 inches wide, and it goes 1/4 of a mile back into the hill, and they've got coal dust lying on the ground. The far end is where they set off the explosions, and they come whooping out of the hole this way towards us. We're standing exactly on the safety line. So there it is, a bit better than I could do in a little cardboard tube. William Garforth definitely established that coal dust can cause explosions, but he also established one other critical thing, and that is that stone dust can stop them. And that is why now they grind up limestone in tons and they lay it down on the floor in every gallery in the country to stop the explosions that otherwise might be caused by the coal dust. Well, William Garforth is the last hero in this programme, and sadly the last in the series. But there are plenty more, so see you next year!
Our afternoon delight starts after the break with 3 hours of Tim and his intrepid cameraman touring the country, beginning in Cornwall.
Turn your house